Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Hey everybody, happy solstice, happy holidays. Today I have a special treat for you, and it's just in time. It's an interview with Ellen Evert Hopman about her really beautiful book, The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas. As you'll hear me say in this episode, it's so much more than herbs, and it's delicious. We talk about a lot of the traditions around the world for this time, and it got me thinking, I would love it if people would call in or reach out with your holiday traditions for this time, no matter the holiday. And particularly if it's different from what we might think of as a traditional American holiday activity, since most of my listeners are here in the States. So educate us. What are some of the interesting traditions that maybe have been passed down for centuries at this time of year? Email me at patrick@bigseance.com. There are also a couple of ways that you can leave me a voice message, especially if you want to get your voice on the show. And to learn more about that, go to bigseance.com/contact. All right. I can't wait to hear from you. So let's bundle up, pour the tea, and here we go. Ellen Evert Hopman is a master herbalist and lay homeopath who has been a Druid initiate since 1984. She is a founding member of the Order of the White Oak, the Archdruid Amerita, and founder of Tribe of the Oak, a former professor at the Grey School of Wizardry, and a member of the Grey Council of, I should have asked about this, Mages. The Grey Council of Mages and Sages. She is the author of Celtic herbals and Druid novels, including Secret Medicines from Your Garden, The Sacred Herbs of Samhain, and Once Around the Sun, Stories, Crafts, and Recipes to Celebrate the Sacred Earth Year. She lives in Massachusetts. You can learn more about Ellen at elleneverthopman.com. And that, of course, will be in the show notes as you're listening if you want to click on it. As long as you're not driving, don't wreck a car and try to click on it while you're driving. Today, we're going to talk about Ellen's most recent of many books that she's authored, and that is The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas, Remedies, Recipes, Magic, and Brews for the Winter Season. And I did not know about Ellen's work this last fall, but I'm super excited to now, as I dig through this book and enjoy it, I really am going to check out, the Sacred Herbs of Samhain. I'm totally pumped, and I'm ready to click buy on Amazon for that. Welcome to the Big Seance Parlor, Ellen. It's nice to have you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and happy solstice.
Absolutely. I love this time. And now that I'm retired, of course, I'm ready for some snow. I'm ready for it. Bring it.
Yeah, we haven't really had snow yet, which is weird. I mean, in Massachusetts at the end of December, Well,
who knows what to expect now with changes in weather and the planet.
Right.
So after spending some time with this book, I can tell the listener that it is so much more than a book about herbs with recipes. There is so much great information about the origins of Christmas and Christmas-like traditions as well. And I got a review of the book from a friend of the show last night, and it was so beautiful. I was like, I'm just going to straight up read the review of this book. And so this is from Leslie, who is also one of the hosts of the Living Dead Girls podcast. And she says, it's beautiful and practical. I'm very over all the pretentious herb/recipe/ritual books that leave me feeling like I can't do this stuff. I'm broke, busy, and tired. This is a reasonable read, accessible, interesting, and most of all, encouraging.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, my peeps need to know that. And I really am enjoying the book. I'm about halfway through. And, I've been scanning through the rest before this interview, but I'm definitely going to finish it and have the shelving ceremony in the library. Also, as I was reading, I couldn't help but feel like some of these traditions are very much like our current Halloween traditions. So, first question, I guess, what are some of the similarities between our Halloween, I guess not necessarily just here in the States, but between our Halloween and Samhain traditions and Christmas?
Well, actually, I hadn't really thought of that, but you're right. Actually, for the Celts, there were really only two seasons, summer and winter. And summer starts at Beltane, which is May Day, and winter starts at Halloween, Samhain. So you have the light half of the year and the dark half of the year. And winter solstice is in the middle of the dark half of the year. So our culture, for some reason, has forgotten about May Day. I have a whole book about it. It's called The Sacred Herbs of Spring. It's herbs for Beltane or May Day. But our culture, our American modern culture, remembers Samhain, which is Halloween. It's not pronounced Samhain. A lot of people, anyway, it's Samhain. So at Samhain, which, by the way, the Celts had a lunar calendar. It was not October 31st. Just as Beltane was not May 1st, Imbolc was not February 1st. That's not how it was. So Samhain was at the dark of the moon, which makes a lot of sense because it was a very scary time and you were supposed to stay inside. You didn't go out. And if you did go out, you would put on a disguise. And at Yule or solstice, there are different cultures where people, the Shetlands and other places, where people will wear straw masks and disguises at Yule. And the reason is, right now, we're in the darkest part of the year. This is the darkest part of the dark, the absolute longest nights. Okay. And actually, today is today Tuesday?
Today is Tuesday.
Today is Tuesday. It's the dark of the moon. So this is the darkest time of the darkest month of the darkest time of year. Okay. And I mean, there's a whole lot that goes with this. This is why people put lights on trees and lights on the house. I mean, that's why we're doing it. They don't know that's why they're doing it, but that's why they're doing it. So tonight of all nights is the darkest night. So what happens when it's dark like this is the underground spirits that normally live, deep underground, that's the ancestors, the fairies, anything that lives underground, they feel very comfortable coming up at this time because our earth most closely resembles their native home. So this is when you get a lot of spirits wandering around. And for example, in Scandinavian or Germanic tradition, you have the wild host. You have these spirits that wander across the sky, led by a goddess, by the way. And these are the ancestors and the dead and gods and goddesses. So what happens is at this time of year when it's dark, if a storm comes up and you see these roiling clouds, rushing across the sky, that's them. So that's kind of scary. And in Greek tradition, there are goblins basically that come up from underground. They're very troublesome. They like to play tricks on people. They're really not nice. And in the book, I have a whole chapter on these kinds of spirits, but there are things that you have to do to protect yourself. So in Greek tradition, you burn old shoes in the fireplace And that repels these goblins.
It would probably repel me out of the house too if I burned it.
Yes. But what's interesting is in Scottish tradition, at Hogmanay, which is New Year's, you burn juniper in the hearth, and that purifies the home and it also drives out bad things. But if you have a very persistent ghost that just won't go away, or something nasty that's in the house that you can't get rid of and the juniper doesn't do the trick, guess what? You burn a strip of leather. And so isn't that interesting? So in Scotland, it's a strip of leather. In Greece, it's old shoes. And of course, old shoes would have been made of leather back in the day.
Yeah.
So if you have something really nasty that you need to get rid of, usually herbs like sage, juniper, aromatic herbs will do the trick. Make sure you crack open some windows or leave a door open so that the nasties can get out. But if that doesn't work, burn some leather. I'm telling you, that's in the book, by the way.
Yeah, keep that in mind. You mentioned, and I don't remember where or what tradition, but there were a lot of people going out in mask to confuse the evil spirits or, something like that. And that also felt I'm like, wow, they were doing that at Halloween too.
Right. It's called guising and mumming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at Solstice, people go door to door wearing these disguises, asking for food and drink or offering food and drink, or, it's like, but it's the same idea. It's that you want to disguise yourself so that anything nasty that's out there or a dead relative that's out to get you or whatever, so they won't identify you, basically.
And you mentioned May Day, actually. I wanted to circle back to that because I do remember when I was very young, it had to have been kindergarten or first grade,
right?
Being taught about May Day.
Right.
And we made a paper bouquet of flowers out of paper. And we were instructed to go find, I think it was specifically go find a woman in your life, like grandma, mom, somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told that, we could go up and place it on the doorstep and knock on the doorstep and run away. I remember that.
Yes. And when I was, it was either kindergarten or first grade, we made paper baskets. We made them out of paper by stapling two pieces of paper together with the paper flowers, and we were instructed to hang it on somebody's doorknob. Well, guess what happened? The Russians, those nasty commies, they had these May Day parades. So the government came down and said, no, you can't celebrate May Day. And it was pretty much eliminated. But what's happening now is people are bringing it back. Pagans, of course, are bringing it back. But I live in New England. It's called New England for a reason. But we have public May Day festivals with a maypole and dancing around the maypole. But we also have a lot of private ones going on. But it does seem to be coming back, at least underground. I don't think the public schools are doing it, though.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I never hear anything about May Day, but it's always stuck out in my mind. And I don't remember who I delivered that to, those flowers, but I remember being excited to follow this tradition and go knock on a door and run away or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I did the same thing. And then it all stopped.
Yeah.
It ended.
I had a good belly laugh reading about some of the mystical Icelandic figures, such as, and I'm reading the English names here, but Gully Gawk, Stubby, Spoon Licker, Pot Scraper, Bowl Licker, Door Slammer, Sausage Snatcher, and Doorway Sniffer, and there's a few others. Will you talk a little bit about these figures? Because it was really funny.
Those are the Yule lads, and one of them comes every night, and there's precautions that you have to take. So if you leave a dirty spoon out, for example, or a dirty pot liquor will come into the house and, lick it. So they're kind of cute. They're like elves or spirits that come into the house, and they're like oafs, they're very clumsy oafs, basically.
Oh, it's so funny. And they also it's very much follows into the whole scaring kids to behave.
Exactly.
And spoon liquor sounds really cute or bowl liquor sounds really cute, but I'm sure there's some scary qualities to them. And so it's like, better live right, better clean up your house, better be good, or these characters are going to come clean it up for you.
Well, that's what Krampus is all about. And, you have these really scary figures. But what's interesting is in the Krampus parade, you have these demonic looking, really nasty figures that run around scaring kids. But in between the nasty figures, there's usually a beautifully dressed, usually it's a woman in a beautiful white gown called the Christ Child, but it's a woman. And she goes and she's nice. So what it's reminding you is, like you said, you better be good. If you're bad, you're going to get punished. And if you're nice, you're going to get presents. And then there's always the threat that if you're bad, you'll get a lump of coal in your shoe. But if you're good, you'll get a present under the tree or by your bed or on the windowsill, depending on the culture.
It just blows my mind that over so many centuries, in so many of our traditions, we have had this torturing children, and just the images of some of these characters that are used to scare children. I'm like, how many billions of dollars have been spent on therapy or people, just having emotional trauma over Christmas and the characters that we introduce to them to get them to behave?
Well, I think it's also a reminder that this is a very serious season. This isn't just a season to be jolly. American Christmas is very sanitized, very commercialized.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you could die if you didn't have proper wood or food stored for the winter, or if you weren't getting along with your neighbors. It was serious business. So this is really a life or death time of year, which kind of ties into the herbs of the season, which is why the evergreens, things that stay green all winter, are looked to for guidance. They represent intelligence, perseverance, strength, the ability to survive. Isn't it amazing this thing stays green even in the middle of the storms?
Right.
And that's what the evergreens are all about. Those are the sacred herbs of Christmas.
If I go back to those Icelanders, I was all about this. It sounds so delicious to me. You say Iceland is an unusually literate, book-loving society.
Yep.
And on Christmas Eve, Icelanders exchange books as gifts and then spend the night reading them, often while drinking hot chocolate or an alcohol-free Christmas ale. And I am like, invite me to that party, please. I would love it.
Yeah, imagine Americans doing that.
Oh, no.
It's hard to picture. But yeah, I think it's great. And that's considered one of the best Christmas presents that you could possibly get, is a book or books.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm just imagining everybody at their get together or whatever, and then you exchange, and then it's like, okay, go ahead and leave the house because I'm reading now. I'm gonna crawl up in the bed and get cozy by the fire and with my eggnog, and I'm gonna read. So Merry Christmas. See you later. One night I was reading the book. I was just telling my husband about bell snickling, and I was laughing, and without talking, he immediately pulled up the episode of The Office where Dwight introduces everyone to bell snickling. And because I never watched The Office, I had no idea. And it was hilarious. Have you seen this episode?
No, I don't watch The Office.
I don't either, but I would encourage you to watch. It's a big chunk of the episode is Dwight, one of the goofy characters, going around and, deciding whether someone was good or bad and whipping them with his branches or whatever. And I encourage you to check that out. I'm sure some of our listeners have seen it too. You wrote a rite for the goddess at the winter solstice. And I particularly liked two portions of that rite. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind reading them for us. They are the call in the three worlds of the ancestors, nature, spirits, and gods, which is on page 57, and the petition for healing, which is on page 60. So this is a much larger rite that is beautiful and beautifully written, but I thought those two would be nice, selections to read today and to have it in your own voice.
Well, first, I just want to say that there are now 3 books. One is called The Sacred Herbs of Samhain, one is called The Sacred Herbs of Spring, and then this one is The Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas. And in each of the books, there's a full ritual that you can do. So the Samhain book has a ritual for the Morrigan, who's a triple goddess in the Celtic tradition, and she's associated with battle and with death. Then for the spring book, I have a ritual for the goddess Flora, and she's a Roman goddess, and her festival is absolutely fantastic. It involved people pelting each other with beans and liberating rabbits and goats. So you picture everybody at the Colosseum throwing beans at each other while goats and rabbits are running amok, and everybody's dressed in really bright clothes, So anyway, so I have a whole ritual in there, and I say, if you can, bring a goat to the festival and liberate a rabbit, and that would be very traditional. But
free the rabbit.
Exactly. But Flora is very much misunderstood because flowers are incredibly important. She's the goddess of flowers. People tend to think of flowers as fluffy and cute and pretty and so on. But if you don't have flowers, you don't get fruit, So flowers are serious business,
Yeah.
And I even quote Roman authors talking about that, saying, don't mistake Flora for something, froofy. She's very important, make sure that you have good flowers or you'll never see any fruit, and things like that. But anyway, so the Sacred Herbs of Yule and Christmas, I have a ritual for the Cailleach, and the Cailleach in Scottish tradition is a goddess of winter. In Irish tradition, she's more of a land goddess, but at Tribe of the Oak, we think of her as a winter goddess. And Cailleach means the old woman or the old veiled one. And she's also a creator goddess. She created the islands on the west coast of Scotland and around Ireland, and that's her. And there's hundreds of them, and she made them. So she's a creator goddess. But anyway, so in the ritual, part of the ritual, we call in the ancestors, the nature spirits, and the gods. And this is a very deep subject. I could do an entire lecture just on this. But those are called the 3 worlds. So the ancestors and the fairies live underground. And then you have the nature spirits, which would be the animals, the trees, the plants, us, are in the middle world. And then the gods are in the sky world. So that's the 3 worlds. And I recently found out, and this blew my mind, that the Mayans have the exact same cosmology. It's just incredible. I just saw a video recently. And that's why Druids revere trees so much, because trees represent the 3 worlds. The roots go down to the underworld of the ancestors and the Sidhe, the fairies. The trunk represents the middle earth where we live, and the animals and the plants and so on. And then the branches reach up to the sky world, which is where the gods and goddesses are. So I like to say that every tree is a church for a druid. So when we do a ceremony, we always call in the 3 worlds. Sometimes we say land, sea, and sky. Sea is actually underground, because if you keep digging, you're going to hit water. So obviously, sea is under the ground, right? So sea is underground, and then land, and then sky. Land, sea, and sky. Those are the 3 worlds. So it goes, we now invoke the sacred 3, land, sea, and sky. Ancestors in the sacred land, you whose blood and bone have made the soil upon which we stand, you whose sacrifice of laughter and tears have enabled us to be alive today. You whose teachings and spirit have been bequeathed to us in our books and traditions and our listening. We honor you and welcome you into our circle. Nature spirits, seen and unseen, you who have given your flesh, blood, and fur so that we may eat and live, you who have given us your love, we welcome you here, winged, scaly, furred, and feathered ones, also the trees and herbs of the forests and fields, the mighty she beneath the hills, and elementals who make our gardens grow. Please be with us in our circle. We thank you and we honor your presence here. And then it goes to the sky world. All the gods and goddesses of our people, known and unknown, named and unnamed, you of the sky realms, you whose wisdom and care have guided us through all the seasons of our lives, be with us here in our circle. We honor you and ask for your blessings. So that's one of the things that distinguishes a Druid ritual from, say, a Wiccan ritual or a witch ritual. We don't call in 4 directions. We call in 5, at least 5, sometimes 12. And rather than a 4-direction cosmology, we have a vertical up and down 3-world cosmology. Yeah.
I thought it was really, really beautiful. And showing appreciation and thanking all the different parts and the animals and the nature. I loved it. And then the other one was the petition for healing on page 60.
There comes a time in every person's life when they embark on an underworld journey. And keep in mind that when Tribe of the Oak did this ritual, we do rituals online. We have a group on Facebook called Tribe of the Oak Public Forum, which people can come and join. But we also have a public ritual page. So we do public rites from time to time, which everybody can come to. So this was actually done during the time of COVID.
Mm.
We will all visit the underworld more than once in the course of our lives. The journey may begin with the loss of a loved one or a life-threatening illness, or a grave disappointment in our career or craft. When this happens, we feel lost and adrift and separated from everything we once held dear. Everything we once knew, our certainty is gone, and we are set adrift. We're in shock. We despair. We grieve. Then we descend to the realm of the Old One, the crone, the Kalyach, Lady Death, Hecate, Baba Yaga, Ereshkigal, La Santa Muerte, she who bears 1,000 names. She hears us. She understands. We have but to ask. Make now your petitions for healing. And then people, if we're online, they type in their petition. If you're in a ritual space, people can silently ask for help or they can out loud make a petition.
Thank you for reading that. I really appreciate it. I thought those were beautiful and they're taken directly from the book, and there are other parts of that rite as well that people can check out. So let's talk about some of the recipes and things that you have and the herbs. First of all, you have so many, there's 2 or 3 chunks in the book of just pages of beautiful images of the plants and the herbs that are mentioned a lot in the descriptions and in the recipes. And you have medicinal purposes for things and also the magical uses of things, which is nice. And I also learned that in some parts of France at midnight on Christmas, they serve 13 desserts. And I was like, again, that would be a place I would love to be invited to. You know, a lot of those portions of the book I was reading late at night, and I just happened to have a brandy Alexander with me, you know, which was very eggnoggy, and I had some nutmeg on the top, and, you know, sitting by the Christmas tree, and I'm sitting here just, it's like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm just drooling looking at all of these recipes. But I also learned I would not do well if I were invited to a traditional Christmas dinner in either Poland or Russia. I think I would peace out early on some of those. on some of those traditions. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about maybe some of your favorite recipes that you researched or wrote about in the book.
Well, the book, just so you know, it has, well, you mentioned it, it has many different cultures: Polish, Russian, German, French, Italian, Spanish, Venezuelan.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on. So I give a description of a traditional Christmas dinner for each of those cultures. I try to give at least one recipe from each culture of a traditional food that you can make. But since I listed all the traditional foods for the meal, you can then look them up if you want to create, say, an Australian Christmas. Australian Christmas is basically English Christmas, but if it's done traditionally. But I also have a whole chapter just on beverages. And
the cocktails look so delicious. Let me just tell you.
I have African drinks in there, Korean. Anyway, I kind of went nuts. But what I do is I list the ingredients and I give instructions. So you can make the dish or you can make the drink just as a recipe. But I also give the magical properties of the ingredients as you're reading the book. So the herbs, I describe the magical properties: fruits, nuts, seeds. So at that point, if you figure out the magical properties of everything that's going into the drink, it becomes a potion. That's what a potion is. So most of the things are oriented to solstice, and solstice, of course, is all about the return of the sun. So lemons and oranges are very solar. So there's a lot of that. And then spicy, warm things like cinnamon, ginger, allspice. Those are fiery. So again, they're all related to winter solstice. But if you just pay attention to the magical properties, you can then craft for yourself a drink. Say you want to bring healing, or say you want to bring abundance, or you want to bring joy, or, whatever it is that you're trying to create, or peace. Then you'll select the appropriate herbs and make a nice little libation to share with people.
My great grandma and my grandma introduced, celebratory punches in my life. And there are also quite a few punches in your book. And my grandma was also a fan of lemon, and like lemon was in everything. And there is so much lemon incorporated into a lot of these.
Yeah, there's even a lemon Yule log. Usually Yule logs are chocolate, right? But I found a lemon Yule log recipe. Because lemons are all about the sun and the moon, actually, the full moon and the sun. So it's very appropriate. Even just having slices of lemon floating in your punch, or slices of lemon on the altar if you have an altar. The scent of lemon. Or just a bowl of lemons, and that's to welcome the sun and honor the sun.
I think listeners would also be very interested in learning more about the Irish tradition of Women's Christmas. I had never heard about this, which apparently is on January 6th, when the women of a household, you say, get to relax and be waited on by others.
Right.
And I love that. I don't know that I necessarily predicted Ireland to have started this tradition, but I love it. And, whether it's really the women or a woman in your family who does all of those things and the cooking, it's nice for whoever does that. Give them a day to be waited on by others.
Well, people don't really understand Ireland. Ireland is actually more liberal than the United States now, because they have universal abortion access, for example. They don't go to church anymore. Only 5% or something go to church.
Wow.
A lot of them are becoming Druids, which is very nice, but they've kind of given up on the Catholic thing.
That's good. That's good. Peace out on the Catholic.
It's because of the pedophile situation.
Yeah.
But women, it's very interesting. First of all, in ancient times, if you study the Brehon laws, which are the ancient laws, women in Ireland and also in Scandinavia, they weren't exactly equal to men, but they Certainly had rights of inheritance. They had rights of divorce. In Scandinavia, women could vote just like men, so the women were pretty powerful. And then the church came along and everything got wrecked, and everything went backwards. And now we're still trying to recover from all that. But the most powerful person in a village was the widow, which is really interesting, because if you're a widow and you have no man, you can call on any man in the village to help you. And that the Kaljach is the old woman. But the Kaljach is the hag. Hag comes from the word for holy, hagia. It's actually a holy person. But the old woman dressed in black, the veiled one, the old veiled woman, the widow dressed in black, is actually the most powerful person in the village.
And also like all the wisdom and the history and the knowledge of the years.
Yeah.
In so many of the traditions from around the world that you wrote about, they include things like leaving food or a place set at the table for their dead loved ones. And in some countries, I thought it was interesting to find that they left their beds empty and the doors open in case spirits drop by and, need a place of rest. Will you talk a little bit about that? Because that's going to be right up my listeners' alley on this podcast.
Well, I already talked about how at this time of year, the ancestors, the dead, the spirits, the ones who live underground, which is where the ancestors and the fairies are, they feel most comfortable being on the earth at this time because it's dark and that's what they're used to. So this is why in some cultures, we put candles in windows, and that's to welcome the spirits so they can find the house. The ones that are wandering around, they might not recognize the yard. Things might have changed, So you put a candle outside or you put a candle in the window so that they know where your house is, And I mean, back in the day, it would have been really dark, with no electric lights or anything like that. So a candle in the window was a big thing. And you want things that come down the chimney. For example, we still put food out for Santa, right? And sometimes for Santa and the reindeer. And you're supposed to leave it by the hearth, if you have a hearth. But that's because things come down the chimney. And there's a lot of different spirits that come down the chimney. La Befana, the Christmas witch, comes down the chimney. Santa Claus comes down the chimney. And that gets into the Yule log tradition, but that's a whole other subject. So we put food out and we assume that the spirit of Santa is going to be there to eat the food. And they don't eat the actual food, they eat the essence of the food. So they see the food and they absorb the essence of the food. And that gives Santa Claus the energy to keep going, right? La Befana comes down the chimney and she blesses your broom. So you should have a new broom and you put that by the chimney so that she can bless it. And then you can ritually sweep out the house. You can sweep out the old year with your new broom that has been magically blessed by La Befana. But you also leave out food for her. And it's very nice. At Samhain, you do the same thing. You at Halloween, you leave one place at the table for your ancestors.
The way you described it, the essence of the food kind of answers a question that I have asked people before, in paranormal investigation, or sometimes with people on there, if they have altars for their ancestors or whatever, sometimes they'll leave libation or wine or some kind of gift of food. And I've had people say, and maybe it's people that don't understand these traditions, but I've had people say, don't do that because it could anger a spirit or frustrate a spirit because of the fact that they can't really drink it or they can't really eat it. Like it would just be tempting them and then they can't do anything with it. And I don't remember kind of where I heard these things, but I've always had that in the back of my mind. And it did make me wonder, like when I cross over to the other side and die, like I've heard people say, you're going to be in such a happy place. You're never going to want to eat. Like you're not going to have the need to eat. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I love me some pizza. And that's the first thing I'm going to look for when I get to the other side of some pizza. Would it frustrate me if I saw a physical pizza if I'm visiting my loved ones and I can't really eat it.
Well, that's okay. That's not pagan tradition because, for example, the Greeks and Romans, they would always pour wine on the ground. That's very polite. During a ritual, you pour some on the ground specifically so that it goes down to the underworld to feed the spirits. In Scottish and Irish tradition, you have some whiskey, like if your grandfather liked a dram of whiskey, you leave out a dram or you pour it on the ground near the grave and specifically for them. No. In fact, you can also leave clothing. Well, that's for the fairies. It- but you can leave little bits of cloth, and then they take the essence of the cloth and they can make clothing for themselves. But that's more for the fairies. But no, leaving food and drink for the ancestors or the fairies is a very polite thing to do.
I much rather do your way of thinking. I like that. I think that's fine. Leave me a pizza when I'm
Okay.
gone.
I hope everybody's listening.
Yes, leave me a pizza, please. I'll enjoy at least a slice.
Yeah.
I'll enjoy it. Thank you very much. I always wondered where the image of the woman with the candles on her head came from. You see that a lot. And I just never knew. I didn't know if it was just some old painting that was painted once and it's repeated or whatever. But I got the answer in your book. Will you tell us about, I'm assuming it's Saint Lucia?
Lucia, right. Well, she's a Christian figure. Supposedly there was a woman in Rome at the time of the Christian persecutions, which, by the way, Christians in this country like to feel persecuted. That's their big thing. They feel like they're victims, but they were only victims for a short while, just for a few centuries, because in the 4th century, it all turned around and then the Christians were persecuting everybody else. But during the persecutions of the Christians, which didn't last very long, I just keep reminding people, the Christians would hide out in the crypts underground. And so there was this woman named Lucia who would visit the Christians underground, and she would bring them food. And of course, it was dark down there, so she had to have candles with her. And then eventually the Romans figured out what she was doing and she got killed. But that's the origin of it. But it's also related to the solstice story because, again, the whole theme of this time of year, today, as I mentioned earlier, we're at the dark of the moon and the darkest time of year. So it's all about bringing back the light. So I don't know if she was a real figure or if this is just a myth that was created. But, in the Jewish tradition, you have the Hanukkah candles where you start with 1 candle and then the next night 2, the next night 3, the next night 4. Again, it's that light. You're building up the light and then the light comes back. All these traditions. In ancient Rome, there was the god Mithras, who eventually gets merged with Sol Invictus, which is the invincible sun, who's celebrated at the winter solstice, So, throughout time, there's just always been this honoring of the light because you're hoping and praying that that light is going to come back. Because if it doesn't, you're in trouble. There'll be no food, no warmth, no crops, nothing.
Yeah, it's just so interesting that image of Lucia, still gets kind of carried through different images of Christmas. And probably, I imagine I'm not the only one. I bet there's many people who don't know that story. And it was also interesting. You were talking in many of the sections of your book about, and I forget where, but a mushroom with the red and the white spots on the top. And it immediately took me back to growing up, several of the Christmas figurines that my mom would set about at Christmas that I can picture in my head. I know exactly what they look like. Were like of elves or little mice with, Santa hats standing next to one of those mushrooms. And I had no idea that was actually the Christmas image or, plant. Can you tell us a little bit about those mushrooms? I forget what you called them.
It's the Amanita Muscaria mushroom. which is a red mushroom with white spots. If you go to Scandinavia at this time of year, the standard Christmas decorations are red mushrooms with white spots and goats. But you see that everywhere. So what happens is the reindeer, and by the way, the reindeer that pull Santa's sleigh are female. They're not male because the males lose their antlers in the winter. The females don't. So that sleigh is drawn by women, by female reindeer. But anyway, the reindeer.
You also said they were stronger at that time too because of their weight and everything. I thought that was interesting.
The herd is always led by a female, by an old female. In fact, the word Ellen, which is where my name comes from, is an old word for reindeer, the female reindeer. But anyway, so the reindeer love to eat the Amanita. Now, the Amanita is a hallucinogenic mushroom. If you eat it, you'll be in big trouble. So what would happen is the shamans would drink the reindeer urine. After the reindeer had eaten the mushrooms, they could drink the urine, which was a safe way to get high and not have it kill you. And then the shaman would go into trance, and that's how they did it. So the idea of the reindeer, the red and white mushrooms, Santa Claus. Now, I think this is really interesting. Santa Claus, St. Nicholas and Santa Claus a couple of centuries ago would have been dressed in green, and that's in honor of the herbs and the things that stay green all winter, which I already mentioned. But supposedly the Coca-Cola company turned it into this red and white figure. However, I don't know if I quite buy that. I mean, I know they did, but I think they picked up on it from somewhere, because to me, Santa Claus is the spirit of the Amanita. That's why Santa Claus travels with reindeer across the sky. In the same way that Mescalito from the Carlos Castaneda books was the spirit of the mescaline mushroom, right? So I think you can tune into Santa Claus as a spirit, and it's the spirit of the Amanita.
Well, drinking reindeer urine, just a fun Friday night.
Well, you can safely do that at home. Maybe feed the mushrooms to your goat.
There you go.
And then drink the urine or drink the milk. I don't know. Maybe that would work.
What can you tell us about mistletoe?
Again, that's a huge subject.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, well, mistletoe, there's a Scandinavian tradition with mistletoe, and then there's the Celtic Druidic tradition. I'll talk a little bit about the Druid tradition. I have a book called A Druid's Herbal for the Sacred Earth Year, and in there I have an entire chapter just on mistletoe. So the one and only Druid ritual that we actually have that was written down by Pliny the Elder is the gathering of the mistletoe by the Druids. And mistletoe is a very interesting plant because it's not heliocentric. Most flowers bloom in the summer, which is when there's the most light, and flowers will turn to face the sun, right? Mistletoe doesn't care about that. Mistletoe blooms when the Pleiades are high in the sky, and that's in the middle of winter. So right now, or between winter solstice and mid-January is when it's blooming, which is totally weird. And then the berries happen in February, okay? So the Druids had a ceremony. They knew that this was a very important plant. And so what they would do is they would wear white. And as far as we know, that was really the only time they wore white, because wearing white is not very practical. If you're wandering through the fields and woods dressed in white, you're going to be filthy very quickly. And we also know that the Druids wore colors. They wore 6 different colors. But anyway, so they would dress in white just for the ceremony. And I think it was in honor of the white berries. So one Druid would climb a tree, and it had to be growing on oak, which is really interesting because mistletoe grows on apple trees and it grows on poplars and might grow on other things. But when they found it growing on oak, that's when they would have the ceremony. So one Druid would climb the tree and then cut the mistletoe with a golden sickle, which could not have been gold because that's too soft. It was probably bronze. And another Druid dressed in white would be standing below the tree holding a cloth, and the mistletoe would fall onto the cloth. The mistletoe must never touch the ground because it's sacred. And then they would sacrifice 2 white oxen, which is a really big sacrifice. It's like the equivalent of 2 big cars. It's like,
Yeah.
that's a big time sacrifice. And when you sacrifice something, you don't just kill it and leave it there. You burn some of it, which goes up to the sky world through the smoke. You share the rest of it with the community. That's what a sacrifice is. But anyway, so it was a very big deal ritual. Well, it turns out that mistletoe is anti-tumor, and the mistletoe growing on oak has the most potent anti-tumor activity. It's a cancer medicine. And there's a remedy called Iscador, which is part of anthroposophical medicine, which you can look up, which is anti-tumor. And I believe that the Druids knew this, because why would they single out the mistletoe only growing on oak? And I think they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. Where did we get the traditional colors of red and green for Christmas?
The green is the evergreen. So it's conifers, holly, anything that stays green in the cold of the snow and ice, if we ever get snow and ice again, that's the green. And green, they say green is the favorite color of the fairies. They love the color green. But it's like the heart of the earth. It's like green is a very harmonizing color. It's calming. It's the green heart of the earth. That's the green. And it represents immortality. Those are herbs of immortality. The red, things like red berries that you find on holly. In some cultures, it's a red rooster or fire. But the color red has to do with life's blood and passion and warmth. And again, the ability to survive in the dark season. White is the snow, but it's also death. And in the winter, everything looks like it's dead. The trees drop their leaves. A lot of animals in the farm would have been slaughtered for the winter because you didn't have enough food to keep everybody alive all winter. So you had to, make sausages and things like that. And, white is the color of the burial shroud.
Oh.
And we still think of ghosts as white. Why do we think of ghosts as white? It's the burial shroud. And then the color gold is the stars, the sun, the moon, the return of the sun.
This has been so wonderful, and I am very much enjoying the book and would second, what my friend Leslie had to say in her review of the book. It's a good read, and I do think listeners should check it out, and I'm definitely going to check out the one for Samhain for sure. Give us any final thoughts that you have and anything you want to, we're all about promoting our guests too. So anything you want to promote that's coming up, anything in the future that lies ahead for you, and where people can find you in the book.
Well, my website is just my name, elleneverthopman.com. I do have a calendar on there. I'm slowly adding things for 2024. I'm going to be in Orlando, Florida in June. If you live in the United States and you want to order a signed book, you can get it from me. It's through PayPal on my website, elleneverthopman.com. But I'm also fine with people going to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your regular independent bookstore, and just ask for the books. I do have a trilogy of novels that were traditionally published, but they went out of print. They're Druid novels with the Druid path encoded in the books. And those you can only get through my website now. But everything else you can get everywhere. And if you just Google my name, stuff will come up. All the books will come up. But I have an author page on Amazon. I have one on Simon & Schuster. I have one at Inner Traditions Bear and Company. Or just go to elleneverthopman.com and you'll see everything. If you're interested in Druidism, the Druid group is called Tribe of the Oak, and it's tribeoftheoak.org. .org. If you put in tribeoftheoak.com, some weird Japanese site comes up. I don't know. But tribeoftheoak.org we'll get you there. And we're also on Facebook.
We'll put those in the show notes and your website and, links to the book and all of that. You are fabulous, and I think you rock.
Thank you very much. And the one thing we forgot to talk about was werewolves.
Oh.
So I just wanted to say that werewolves like to come out on December 24th. That's their favorite night. So if somebody knocks on the door on the night of December 24th and you don't know who it is, you should have some ash from the fire handy, because if it's a werewolf, you throw the ash at them and that will make them go away. That's an old Lithuanian thing.
Noted. and take note, Hollywood. How come we haven't had a Christmas werewolf movie for that?
From your lips to Warner Brothers' ears.
Right. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/bigseance. Jennifer Scanlon, Michael Henson, Daryl, Anne Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Josiel Lorenzo, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlorguests, are Anne Rekovich from ozparatech.com, Dina DeCastro of Dina DeCastro Astrology, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Amy Park Gedicke of amyparkg.com, Lonnie Scott from weirdwebradio.com, Lana and John of Carbon Lilies, Midge Munster from midgemunster.com, Heather N. of dancingbeealchemy.com, Diane Razmataz, Tracy King, Andrew Watson, Amy Taylor, Christine Rath-Selhe, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cass and Bailey, Melissa Armour, Janet Shaw Binns, Bruce Williams, and Christopher Kohler. And I currently have 4 fabulous listeners who support the show at the $10 level, which isn't even a thing. You know who they are. They're Glenna Becker, Peggy Hagan, Steve and the lovely Judy Skinner, and James Wilfong. I also have 3 wonderful listeners who support the show at the completely made up $20 level. And those peeps are Norman and Linda Keller and Kevin Gilbert. Thank you, paranerds.